Hello everyone, Trophy Wine Hunter. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm doing a really interesting video on wine and the effects of wine and alcohol on health. Why am I doing this video? I think it's quite topical because recently I've seen many articles that have been talking about the effects of wine and alcohol on health, and perhaps some of the studies in the past have been overstating the positive effects. And in particular in Canada, there is a new guideline by the Canadian Centre for Substance Abuse and Addiction, which Health Canada follows, which has cut recommended safe amount of drinking for individuals quite drastically. I think there's more and more millennials that actually are drinking less and in fact not drinking at all. So I think this is very topical, and I think as a person that loves wine, I think we have to really be honest with ourselves and analyze it and not just kind of throw it to the wind. I still remember this famous magazine when I was first starting out in wines, and I was, monthly. This was my big thing. If this is back to 2009, I'm probably aging myself, but it was pre all this social media and YouTube and Google and internet. At that point, I still remember we were buying these magazines, and I was looking forward to Wine Spectator magazines every month, and I would read them from cover to cover. And I'm sure some people still do that, although they might do that online these days. But I remember this issue because it talked about the healing power of wine. And this is great. For me as a wine drinker, I thought, wow, it's positive effects. And for years, I have been telling people as an advocate of wine drinking, hey, there's so many positive effects of wine. Basically, it's good for your heart. It's good for everything other than breast cancer in women. And so I really believed that. Now call me naive, but that's what I really believed. But with the new article, and I'll reference it in the New York Times, and also these new guidelines from the Canadian, the CCSA as we call it, I thought it was time to re-examine it. And this is not new. I mean, many people have told me, the effects of alcohol are not good on you, and consumption has to be done in moderation. So, and that's tough, I know, for many of us as wine lovers, particularly from my perspective. I know how much I love to try different wines, and we are in North America blessed, and sometimes we're excessive with what we do. Firstly, I want to address kind of in 2009 these studies, and I went back to read this magazine again. And I guess probably I just took it in the most positive light. As at that point, a wine enthusiast, wine lover, I just read the headline, The Healing Power of Wine. I read, new research explores the benefits. I took that to mean there are benefits. And now when I'm reading it closer, actually the research hasn't changed that much. It has changed a bit. It was never so clear cut. And perhaps I took a more positive effect of this. So let's go through some of the kind of studies that were mentioned in 2009, and then let's go through kind of the new Canadian guidelines and the reason for those, and then how that affects me and my kind of attitude towards drinking. And again, I'm not trying to be preachy. I'm just kind of going through it in my own mind. I wanted to kind of go through the studies and make sure that I was kind of giving out good information. I wanted to take a very moderate approach, and I think because I'm a wine drinker and a wine lover, probably I have a more even keel approach than people that don't drink, or the people that are, completely think science is out the door. So I'm trying to give a very balanced approach to things. The first comment I'll make is that most of the positive benefits revolving around wine has to do with antioxidants, and in particular resveratrol. And that's an antioxidant reputed to do a number of great things, and that we'll go through those, but in particular for heart and for dementia, things like that. So it's a substance that you find in particular red wine. You find it in white wine, but also in red wine. But what we have to do when we go through these studies is that a lot of these studies were done on mice or rats, and they were just injecting them with resveratrol. But the amounts that they were injecting them to get the effects was quite substantial, and probably to get the same amount of effect that you would have, you would probably drink about 1,500 bottles a day in order to get the same effect. Because we get very little resveratrol from wine, from 2 glasses of wine, very little. So way less than sugar, okay? So that's kind of, we have to take that in the context. From a scientific perspective, yes, resveratrol has these positive effects, but only if you drink them, you take it in large amounts. And those large amounts, if they were consumed in terms of a person, they would have negative effects, because no one can drink 1,500 bottles a day and really be still healthy, I think. The other point is that resveratrol can be obtained from other things, like grape skins, grape juice, and pills. So not that resveratrol doesn't have positive effects, but the idea that I drink wine because I want positive effects because of resveratrol doesn't really hold weight. So in the 2009 study, it said that wine or alcohol was good for the heart. And that's because it produced, when you drink, it produces in order to get rid of alcohol, you produce a substance called aldehyde dehydrogenase 2, which not only breaks down alcohol in the body, but also breaks down fat cells. So that would kind of lessen the impact on the heart. The problem with that is, again, consumption amount. You'd have to drink a lot of wine to do that, to break down fat cells. And the second problem, particular for Asian people, is that many Asian people have a deficiency in aldehyde dehydrogenase 2. So that's why we have what they call Asian flush. So what happens is when the body takes in alcohol, the body reacts and it has to break down that alcohol. Unfortunately, for a lot of Asian people, we don't have that enzyme. And so what happens is that that toxin stays in our body for longer than most people, and that's why we turn red. That's the Asian flush. And so the Asians who have this Asian flush have two kind of problems. One, we intake alcohol quicker than other people, and then we break it down slower than other people, and that's why you have the Asian flush. So that's probably not the greatest thing in the world for your body, and that's why we talk about moderation for drinking. In this Wine Spectator article in 2009, it talked also about that alcohols, or studies show that alcohol delays dementia. But again, that was due to the presence of polyphenols like resveratrol. And again, I went through that you would need a lot, way more than normal people would drink to be able to have that effect. There is studies that say that alcohol consumption increases bone density, and that in some manner prevents arthritis. But again, there's other effects. Now we go to diabetes, and there is some link, the risk of diabetes decreasing and alcohol consumption. However, the American Heart Association and the American U.S. Centers for Disease and Control and Prevention, the CDC, firstly recommends that for adults that don't drink, they shouldn't start. And that's because that even though there may be some benefits in terms of certain things, arthritis and diabetes, overall, alcohol consumption is linked to long-term and short-term risks, such as motor vehicle crashes, high blood pressure, obesity, stroke, and then we'll talk about the kind of the other diseases. So what they're kind of saying is that even if there are some positive effects, there are also negative effects. So you can't just take them in kind of one context. Like, well, I'm going to have better bone structure, but that's going to affect everything. So I think what all these organizations are saying is that overall, if you had to look at it, there are probably more negative effects than positive effects. And I think that's been a switch in the messaging. So that's not what I read when I was reading this 2009. I kind of read that it was the other way, that there was more positive effects than negative effect. But now in reading this closer again today, I think they did kind of quell that a bit. They kind of said, well, there's these studies that are encouraging. And again, what did I expect? It's from Wine Spectator. It's from the leading wine magazine. So they're going to put positive spins on things. So maybe I was being naive, or maybe I was just being willfully blind and I just wanted to believe what I wanted to believe. But that's kind of what I'm taking from the studies now, that even in 2009, there was some skepticism. It just said there looks like there's some good things, but some people doubt that. And now I think with more research, I think the effects are much clearer, that overall there are health risks to drinking. In the course of researching for this video, I came across a very interesting current study, or very recent study made in the US, where they had a very large sample size, about 300,000 drinkers. And they looked at wine consumption, and they said that wine consumption, there was a correlation with lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes for people who consumed alcohol in moderate amounts. That means 14 grams per day, or 1 glass per day for women and 2 glasses a day for men, but only when they drank the alcohol with meals and not when it was consumed alone. So again, these correlation studies are very difficult to kind of just take them and say, oh, because this study says this, then, well, I just drink wine with meals and I should be fine, because there's other factors involved. But kind of it's an interesting study also in the face of all these negative studies. Then we deal with the big one, which is cancer, and I'll talk about that a little bit with the Canadian studies. But the American Cancer Society is clear that there is an increased risk of mouth, throat, esophagus, liver, colon, rectum, and breast cancer. Breast cancer was known for many years, and I think as we do more research, the risk is, it's quite clear that there is a correlation in terms of increased risk. Now, how much is that increased risk? From my reading, it looks like it's between 0.1 and 1%. So it's a higher risk, but some people say, wow, it's 1%. And I think that's quite true. In it itself, it's not the major factor. I mean, you get much higher risk factors for smoking, for obesity, for all types of other, there's many other different things that can add to your risk of cancer. So, I think we have to take that in context, but I think there's no doubt in my mind that there is an increased risk. But is that saying that because of this risk, I should completely not drink? I don't think anyone is saying that. It's just saying there is a risk, and it clears up my naivety. So I want to address two other things that I hear quite often. One is the French paradox, which I think now is being clearly debunked. And that goes that, well, look at the French. The French eat all this stuff and they drink all this wine, and they're one of the healthiest people in the world in terms of lifespan. So it must be that drinking wine must be good for health. And I think those studies have now been debunked because most of them didn't take into account lifestyle factors, which is the French in general eat a Mediterranean diet. And a lot of times in these studies where we see that drinkers are healthier than non-drinkers, what we found now with some of those studies is that there was reasons why people were not drinking, and it could have been underlying health issues. So in order to do these studies, you would have to find non-drinkers who were just as healthy as drinkers and who chose not to drink, not because of other factors which prevented them from drinking. The other thing that you'll see in a lot of these studies that they don't account for is lifestyle. Because in general, people, and I'm making generalizations, I have no scientific proof to prove this, but in general, I think it is believed that wine drinkers, moderate wine drinkers, have healthier lifestyles. That means they probably eat better diets, and by better diets, it means probably better quality food. They have access to better quality food. They probably do more exercise. They are generally in higher socioeconomic levels, so they have better healthcare or opportunities for healthcare. So those factors are really not accounted for in these studies. So what got me on this topic was an article in the New York Times talking about the negative effects of alcohol. And I'll try to have a link to that, or at least say what it is in the comment section here. But it made me re-examine things. And they said in that article that it was alcohol was a direct cause for 7 different cancers. And again, I've went through that in terms of, the risk I don't think is really high, but I don't think you can deny that there is an increased risk. They also suggested that the reason or the problem with alcohol drinking at any level is that it's damaging to DNA. And this could lead to cells growing out of control. And any type of damage to DNA could be harmful. So again, that's quite shocking for me as a wine drinker, because again, I had thought all along that everything was positive about wine drinking. The other thing he talked about is kind of blood vessels. So here in my non-scientific way, I was thinking, well, when I drink red wine, I get flush, and it must dilate my blood vessels. So that must be good for me, because if the blood vessels dilate, then if I have any cholesterol in there, it'll shoot through and things like that. So that's the unscientific way that I thought about things. So I was saying, well, it's good to drink wine. I think the negative part of that is that it also stiffens arteries. So while it's true it might dilate the arteries, wine will also stiffen the arteries, and it might actually create more chances for the arteries to break and there's to be damage in them. So I think there's positive and negative, and I think what I got from all of this research is that I can no longer rely on the health benefits as an excuse for wine drinking. And everyone will probably see this video and say, Trophy, you got to be an idiot. You can't really believe that it was healthy for you. Well, I did. And all I'm saying is that that's not a reason to drink. And I think everyone is clear with this, whether it be the Canadian authorities or the American authorities. If you don't drink, there is no health reason to start. But if you are drinking and you enjoy drinking, then when it's done in moderation, it doesn't have serious health consequences. Now we turn to what moderation means, because in most of the world, moderation means 1 drink per day for women and 2 drinks per day for men. So now we come to the new Canadian Centre of Substance Abuse guidelines. And the last guideline was in 2011. And that was like the rest of the world, 1 drink per day for women, 2 drinks per day for men. New Health Canada guidelines were quite shocking because it's quite dramatic change. What they said in the new guidelines was that now research shows that no amount or kind of alcohol is good for you, and that 1 to 2 drinks a week is a low risk for health consequences. 3 to 6 drinks a week increases your chances for developing cancer, and 7 or more drinks a week strongly increases your risk for heart disease and stroke. And so that's a huge change in my mind. But again, probably just a restate of what we already knew, which is the more alcohol you drink, the more health risks there are. We're talking about a percentage of increased risk, which is fairly small, but we cannot take that into kind of a silo, because it doesn't matter if you completely cut out alcohol consumption, but then you go ahead and just eat more or eat more fatty foods. It's the same thing. You just increase your risk somewhere else. So I think has to be some balance. And what I'm kind of saying here is that we have to embrace the studies and knowledge. Knowledge is good, but at the same time, take a very balanced approach to things. And I don't think as wine drinkers or wine lovers that we can just poo-pah everything that's negative about wine. I think we have to take it into context and say, yeah, I think that's right, but how does that affect me? And I think as long as people make informed choices and understand and embrace knowledge, that's good. So how has that impacted me? Well, it's impacted me in that at least I've went back and tried to do some more research on this topic and realized that some of my positive views of wine are incorrect. And so does that mean I'm going to stop this channel and not drink wine? No, that's not what's going to happen. Having said that, does that mean that I will probably cut back consumption? Yes. And was that a good thing to do? Probably. Because I don't know about other viewers out there, but I can tell you when I drink wine, I'm probably excessive many times. There's no need to drink that much wine. And of course, at a certain point, it's really not that enjoyable. So I think that was a good wake-up call for me. And what it does for me, it encourages me to really enjoy the times that I do drink wine. So no longer do I feel forced to drink wine every time. And I don't think anyone should be in this society. I think these are very healthy studies and healthy conversations, because there are many people that now don't drink wine because of choice. And we should respect that. And likewise, we should respect that even as a wine drinker, we don't always have to drink wine. And I know, as a person that drinks wine and, called the trophy wine hunter, there's an expectation. There's a huge social pressure. When I go to a restaurant or when I'm with friends, it's like, what's wrong with you? You're not drinking? You're the trophy wine hunter. So, but that's okay. So the point of this video for me is to make sure that people understand that wine consumption, like everything else, has risks. Having said that, there's so much pleasure that I derive from wine that that's not going to stop me. I will cherish the times that I drink with people more, I think, and I won't be wasteful of those times and those opportunities, knowing that I am increasing risk every time I drink. So to me, that tells me I have to be more appreciative of every time I have that chance, not waste wine, and not drink wine for the wrong purposes, which is sometimes we just drink because we're forced to drink or we think it's socially acceptable. I only should drink wine when it's pleasurable for me. And I know that sounds silly, that sounds like, Tony, of course, you only drink wine when it's pleasurable, but I think there's a lot of social pressure to drink in many situations. And what I'm trying to say is, let's try to be more accepting of each other's choices in life. And if someone doesn't want to drink, that's great. And maybe we should be more appreciative of our ability to drink, because it's really a blessing to be able to share wine with people. I've been very fortunate in terms of the wines that I get to drink, and now I get to share my views with all my viewers and subscribers. And that's kind of the note that I want to leave this on, that we want to embrace technology, science, and knowledge, but at the same time we want to be able to think for ourselves and to assess our own risk as individuals. I'm not sure if I've said anything new or anything intellectual or interesting even in this video, but I thought it was important to kind of address this as a wine lover, and not just to bury our heads in the sand of these studies. I don't know how people are going to react to this video, and I hope that we can engage in a lot of good discussion, but I hope you've enjoyed this video. Until next time, happy drinking.